All right, we're continuing in Matthew. This week is chapter 17. We'll do verses 1 through 9. Now after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, led them up on a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. Then Peter answered and said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and suddenly a voice came out of the cloud, saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. Hear him." And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their faces and were greatly afraid. But Jesus came and touched them and said, "Arise, and do not be afraid." And when they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. Now as they came down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, saying, "Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man is risen from the dead." So on cue, Peter is the quick, gonna say something. And again, I bring it out, but I really do love his style. I always want to give him a bunch of kudos because he's the one, when Jesus is walking on the water, asks him, call me out to you. And he actually does it. He gets out after Jesus says, "Come," and he does it. That just last week we had it where Jesus is saying, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter's the first one to jump in again. Like, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." That I really commend his zeal and boldness, but here, as is the case often, he kind of puts his foot in his mouth and is kind of rebuked by God here. And, I'm sure he meant well. Again, he's seeing this and probably is clueless as to what's really happening, but intended to show them honor. Let's build 3 tabernacles here. One for you, Jesus, one for Moses, one for Elijah. But that God is setting the record straight here when he speaks in the cloud, that he is setting his Son apart. He's like, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Hear him." So by Peter making these 3 tabernacles, it was probably putting them on equal footing, that Moses, Elijah, and Jesus would all be sort of equally honored here, but that God is making it clear that no, my Son is greater than Moses, greater than Elijah, though these men were great men of God, Moses representing the law and Elijah the prophets, that this was probably 2 of the greatest guys here, and God's making it clear, no, my Son personally is greater than these 2, and his fulfillment as the Messiah, the Son of God, is greater than the law and the prophets. That in fact, he was the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. This was really important. So this is why I believe God speaks from the cloud and kind of rebukes Peter here so that these 3 would know and get this. And, again, he meant well. But he kind of gets rebuked, and it's really great. We'll get to read about how this left an impact on Peter. Peter writes about this later on. We're not going to cover it now, but later. But I also want to look at something a pastor mentioned a few years back. I had a pastor, and he told me this was likely just a trance, a dream. It didn't actually happen. And I want to look at that. So there's maybe a bit of merit. I'll look at that, but I'm also going to propose that this actually happened. So we're going to look at both. But the first one we're going to look at is the concept that when Jesus says this in verse 9, "Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man is risen from the dead," that where he was coming from, this pastor, I'm going to throw up the interlinear and we're going to look at it just real fast. You see I've highlighted verse 9, "Tell the vision." It'll pop down here, but I'll find it again. And it's because of this, the Greek word used here is horama. Horama. So this word that's translated as vision is horama in the Greek. And so what we'll do is let's look at all the other places. I'm going to pull it down now from here. Just wanted to show that. But what we're going to do is look now at all the other places in the scriptures where it's used like this. So I did a search. I found 7 places in the New Testament where the word horama is used in all the scriptures. So I thought that makes sense. Let's look at where this is used. So we have the one here, Matthew 17:9, that's where we are. So "Tell the horama to no one until the Son of Man is risen from the dead." This is the one we're trying to understand. But let's look. So there's one here, Acts 7:31. This is when Stephen is talking about how Moses saw the angel in the fiery burning bush. And that here it says, when Moses saw it, he marveled at the horama, at the sight. So here, you can see the translators actually use a different word for it. They don't say vision, they say sight. And I actually think this was a literal sight that Moses actually saw a burning bush. So this one here would actually be a real sight, an actual sight of something real. But let's look at the other instances. So we have 5 others. And here in Acts 10:17, we'll see this usage again. And this is the one where Peter's on the roof and then he has this vision or this horama of the sheet coming down with all these unclean animals on it. And that God was trying to show him, look, you can go to the Gentiles. Because at first Peter's like, I have nothing to do with anything that's unclean. And God was trying to reveal to him, no, look, you are to go to Cornelius. You are to go to these Gentiles. Though you may see them as unclean, what I have called clean, don't call unclean. So this is where Acts 10:17. Now, while Peter wondered within himself what this horama, what this vision which he had seen meant, behold, the men who had been sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house and stood before the gate. So here, I think it would be pretty reasonable just to assume, like, I don't think we would really assume that there was a sheet coming down from the sky and everyone saw it and all these animals were on it, but that this was like a trance, that he was in it. And further support of that is Acts 12, where am I at here? Yeah, no, sorry, Acts 11:5. The further support that this is a trance, let's look at the language here used. So, I was in the city of Joppa praying, and in a trance I saw a horama, an object descending like a great sheet let down from heaven by the 4 corners, and it came to me. So, furthering this idea that this was a trance, this was a vision, a horama of something that was not real, is supported by these. So this is Peter now rehashing the vision he had in Acts chapter 10. And now if we look at the last 3, we'll see 3 more accounts. And these are the last ones that I found in the New Testament. So we have Acts 12:9. So he went out and followed him and did not know what was done by the angel was real, but thought he was seeing a vision, a horama. So this is when Herod puts Peter in prison and he's going to have him executed. Peter's there in prison and an angel appears to him. His like chains come off. And he's following this angel as he's like walking through the jail. He's supposing that this was not real and that he thought he was seeing a horama. So again, I think, yeah, that makes sense. He's like, I didn't think this was real. I actually thought I was just seeing a dream or like a vision, like something that wasn't actually happening. But once he got out of the jail, he realized, oh, this actually just happened. But I think, again, that supports the idea that the word usage here is something that's not real. So this wasn't actually something that was occurring. Acts 16:9. This is of Paul and how he has a vision of a Macedonian, a Greek man, calling out to him. This is 16:9. And a horama, a vision, appeared to Paul in the night. And then a man of Macedonia stood and pleaded with him, saying, come over to Macedonia and help us. That I would contend again, this says that it appeared to Paul at night. This was likely a dream. I don't think there was actually a Macedonian standing there talking to him. And that he says it in the very next verse, Acts 16:10. Now, after he had seen the horama, immediately we sought to go to Macedonia, concluding that the Lord had called us to preach the gospel to them. So that this was what this dream was about, was that they were to go now to the Greeks. So I think it's not without some merit here that he's proposing that we have 5 of the 7 accounts being used for something that's not real. Like it's a trance, it's a dream, it's something that's not actually happening, but is like imagery that is, but you know, I think that's pretty reasonable. So I do now want to look, though, at the concept that it's literal. This actually was an event that happened. Jesus was going, there was Moses, Elijah, that this event was a real event and not just a vision or a dream. And that's kind of where I lean. And I guess where I'd first go is that Mark 9:2-13, we have a gospel account there. We also have Luke 9:28-36. We have 2 other gospel accounts. And none of them use the word horama. None of them even kind of allude to something that wasn't real or like a dream. They don't say anything like this. So I would say, boy, it's only then Matthew's account that uses the word horama, but these other 2, when they describe it, kind of make no mention of this as a trance or a dream. And then to further that point, I want to look at Luke 9:30-32, where I think Luke's account almost would seem to explicitly refute the idea that this was a like vision or dream, something that was not real. So Luke 9:30-32, and behold, 2 men talked with him, who were Moses and Elijah, who appeared in the glory and spoke of his decease, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. But Peter and those who were with them were heavy with sleep. So if I just stopped there, I'd almost say, oh, look, this actually is supporting the idea that they were heavy with sleep. This was probably a trance. This wasn't actually something that happened. But the very next sentence, and when they were fully awake, they saw his glory. So they still saw the glory of Jesus and the two men who stood with him. So this is where I feel like, oh, yikes. If it had said, and when they were fully awake, they just saw Jesus, I would kind of say, oh boy, that seems to almost really support the idea that they were really heavy with sleep, but then when they were fully awake, they only saw Jesus, and I would say, bada boom, bada bing. There you go. You've got it. Here is evidence that once they were fully awake, all they were seeing was Jesus. But the fact that it's once they were fully awake, they still saw Jesus in his glory and still saw the other two men standing beside him, I go, gosh, I feel like that would refute this idea that they were in a trance or a dream. And again, this is just one instance of this, but I think another piece of evidence that supports this is I'm going to jump back to those verses. We do have one of the verses where it uses horama that is a physical sight. Like I would contend that Acts 7:31 was something that was real, that happened. This wasn't a trance or a dream that Moses had. He actually was in the desert when he saw that burning bush. So I think that this offers support for the word in the Greek horama actually being used in a literal sense. So it's possible that, again, it could be in 17:9 that this was a literal physical thing happening, not like a metaphor or imagery or anything. And then lastly, let's turn to 2 Peter. So I mentioned we would come back to where Peter discussed this. This had a lasting impact on Peter, that so much so that he wrote it down. And Peter is a first-hand account. He was actually on the mountain with James and John. So it's just the three of them with Jesus, and he writes about it. And I want to look at the language he uses to describe this event. So this is 2 Peter 1, verses 16 through 18. For we did not follow cunningly devised fables when we made known to you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but we were eyewitnesses of his majesty. For he received from God the Father honor and glory when such a voice came to him from the excellent glory, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." And we heard this voice which came from heaven when we were with him on the holy mountain. And I just feel like Peter's recording of this event seems so strongly to support the idea again that this actually happened. When he's saying that we were eyewitnesses of this, that's again sounds like the testimony of someone who's like, I was actually there, dude, I saw this. Not a like, oh, we all collectively had a dream or something. It's just like, dude, I saw this. Like, you can't tell me this didn't happen. We were eyewitnesses of his majesty when he received from God the Father honor and glory. And that again, he's saying we were with Jesus on the mountain. Like that was an actual thing. We were actually there. So again, I feel like all of these really, in my mind at least, strongly support the idea that this actually happened, though I don't think it's not without merit that some would say, hey, maybe this was just a vision or like a dream or something, trance. But I'm sure this then kind of begs the question about like, well, then what is going on here? Because, it's kind of strange, right? He's like shining like the sun, and Moses and Elijah, and I think we kind of have already touched on it, but that I think Peter's account gives a lot of clarity as to what's happening here. He's kind of telling us here in verse 16 and 17, but we were eyewitnesses of his majesty, the majesty of the Lord Jesus, for he received from God the Father honor and glory. That this is what's happening. This is to be glorifying his beloved Son, Jesus, before these three witnesses here, that they would know this and that they would come to realize this. And as we kind of covered already, that this was to exalt his Son, the Messiah, above Moses and the law, above Elijah and the prophets, that this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Hear him. This is giving him honor and glory. And I guess lastly, I would just contend, I think there was a bit of encouragement happening here for Jesus. If we go back to Luke's account here, you'll see in verses 30 through 31, and behold, the two men talked with him, who were Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his decease, his death. Like they were talking to Jesus about the death which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. So I feel like there's so many accounts where Jesus goes up on a mountain to pray. He'll go by himself. He's receiving encouragement, and that Moses and Elijah, great men of God, are speaking to Jesus about the death. And Jesus already knew he was going to have to die, but I think are like walking him through this or encouraging him about this. Like, here, don't worry, like this is this, and that he would be like, yes, strengthened again. Because how often we in life, we might know what we need to do, but it still doesn't make it hard. It can still be very difficult to say, I know what I'm supposed to do here, but man, this is going to be so difficult, that I think he's receiving encouragement from Moses and Elijah. And to further support the idea that Jesus often is receiving encouragement from others, we did this one, I think, last week, but in the Garden of Gethsemane in Luke 22:41 through 43, and he was withdrawn from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if it is your will, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Then an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. That here, Jesus is, going through anguish. This is agony, it says. It says he was like sweat, or like drips of like blood were coming down from his face, the tears, that he's then being strengthened by an angel. So this is not uncommon, that the Lord Jesus is being strengthened, and he is in the garden about to go to his death. He knows this is imminent. And again, we've seen in Matthew 4, where he's being tempted by the devil, and there's the 3 temptations, and that the final one here is Satan trying to get him to do something different. He goes, your father's path is you'll inherit the kingdoms after you suffer, die, and rise again, but I'll give it to you the easy way. Just come and worship me, and I'll give it to you now. And Jesus is like, not a chance. Matthew 4:10 through 11, then Jesus said to him, away with you, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship Yehovah your God, and him only you shall serve. Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and ministered to him. So once more again, Jesus, when he's going through some anguish or trouble, they come and strengthen him, and he is encouraged. So I think that's a bit of also what was going on here in Matthew 17. Let us continue now there. We'll go back to Matthew 17. And we'll go to verses 9 through 13. I'm going to repeat verse 9 because I think it gives clarity to the question they're going to bring up. So verse 9 again. Now, as they came down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, saying, tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man is risen from the dead. And his disciples asked him, saying, why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? Jesus answered and said to them, indeed, Elijah is coming first, and will restore all things. But I say to you that Elijah has come already, and they did not know him, but did to him whatever they wished. Likewise, the Son of Man is also about to suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he spoke to them of John the Baptist. So this is, we talked about this a lot in Matthew 11, but here is a glimpse. And the reason I repeated verse 9 was I think it's essential to understand what their question is in verse 10. When Jesus says, tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man is risen from the dead, I would contend that this triggered in their minds, they still did not understand this idea that Jesus is going to die and literally rise in 3 days. But I think they understood the resurrection. They heard this, you're going to be raised from the dead, the great and final day of the resurrection. That's what their minds went to. And so they're sitting there going, well, wait a second here. When you said now that you'll be raised from the dead, they all know, yes, they believe in the resurrection. If you remember, you have the Pharisees, they believed this. Jesus did, the disciples. It was the Sadducees who did not believe in a resurrection. They thought that this life was all you had, but that this was common belief for them. And so when they hear him saying risen from the, it's probably immediately going, oh yeah, we all know that, Jesus. But then that's why it begs the question, wait a second. If the resurrection's coming soon, I thought that Elijah was supposed to come first. So just to look quickly at support for this idea that many of Jesus's believers and followers, and he himself, they believed in this, I want to jump to John. It is chapter 11, where Martha has this great exchange with Jesus. So Jesus is coming, Martha's his friend, Lazarus, her brother, died. She's seeking comfort and kind of telling him, man, if you'd have just been here, he wouldn't have died. And he says, he'll rise again. When he said that, I want to contend, she didn't say like, oh, cool, you're going to heal. No, she goes, oh, yes, I believe in the resurrection. Yes, at the last day. I know he will rise then. So I think that's good evidence that, look, when Jesus uses the phrase kind of rise again, or everyone, Jewish minds that believe in this, like the Pharisees, immediately, oh yeah, I know about the resurrection. I know about the last day. So let's read it. This is John 11, verses 21 through 27. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. See, and so he's talking about he's going to raise him from the dead here in moments, but her mind, when she heard this, didn't think, oh, cool, you're going to bring him back. What did she think? Verse 24, Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So this is what I think his disciples were thinking. When he mentioned that the Son of Man will be risen from the dead, that's what they thought. Immediately they're going, oh, right, in the resurrection at the last day. And then it continues, verse 25, and Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world. So I think this is a good example of when a follower of Jesus heard this phrase, risen again, raised from the dead, that their mind went to the resurrection, this final day. And so that's what I think is happening here in Matthew 17. And this is why in verse 10, they say, why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? Because they're thinking, wow, okay, so the last day, the big resurrection's happening, but I thought Elijah was supposed to come first. And we covered this before. This is from the prophecy in Malachi, chapter 4, verse 5. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of Yehovah. We've covered this when we did Matthew 11, and I think here in Matthew 17, Jesus is affirming this. Jesus answered and said to them, indeed, Elijah is coming first and will restore all things. Like he's like, yes, this will happen, that he will come. So he's affirming Malachi 4:5 in this. It's only then when he continues that he kind of maybe muddles things just a little bit, because then he goes on to mention, oh yeah, well I say Elijah's already come. And they did do him as they pleased. He's talking about how they killed John the Baptist. And they even understood that this time. We covered that with Matthew 11 and how it's kind of a little confusing, because it's just this simple thing though, that when John the Baptist was born, the angel says he will come in the power and spirit of Elijah, and that this is what it means by this. But that clearly we have in John chapter 1, they ask him, are you Elijah? And he says, no. So this is how they're both true. So Jesus isn't contradicting himself here. He's saying, yes, indeed, Elijah will come. Malachi 4:5 will happen. But that, in fact, in some sense, Elijah has already come, John the Baptist, and they killed him. And that's what they're going to do to me. So I hope that maybe gives some clarity there. Let's continue. We'll go back to Matthew here, 17. We'll do verses 14 through 21. All right. And when they had come to the multitude, a man came to him, kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is an epileptic and suffers severely, for he often falls into the fire and often into the water. So I brought him to your disciples, but they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him here to me. And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, why could we not cast it out? So Jesus said to them, because of your unbelief. For assuredly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. However, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. We'll circle back to verse 21, but for the moment here, just focusing on the devil, his demons, that they are here to bring destruction, suffering. This reminds me of the words of Peter in 1 Peter 5:8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. That this is what they are here to bring. And I think let's turn to Mark's account. I think it gives just a little bit more detail. This is Mark 9, verses 17 through 29. I think it gives a lot more detail about the suffering of the child, the suffering of the father. So it's a parallel account. It's the exact same thing, but just told with a little more detail. So let's go. Verse 17, then one of the crowd answered and said, Teacher, I brought you my son who has a mute spirit, and wherever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. So I spoke to your disciples that they should cast it out, but they could not. He answered him and said, O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me. Then they brought him to him, and when he saw him, immediately the spirit convulsed him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming at the mouth. So he asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood, and often he has thrown him both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. And immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And when Jesus saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to a deaf and dumb spirit, I command you, come out of him and enter him no more. And the spirit cried out, convulsed him greatly, and came out of him. And he became as one dead, so that many said, he is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had come into the house, his disciples asked him privately, why could we not cast it out? So he said to them, this kind can come out by nothing but prayer and fasting. And we'll revisit verse 29 here in a bit. But yeah, I think this account makes it just so clear here that this was horrible, the foaming of the mouth, the gnashing of the teeth, that this demon sought to destroy this child by throwing him into the fire, throwing him into the water, seeking to destroy him, and that from childhood, this had been going on from childhood, that this was awful, and that sadly there are those who worship Satan, and they practice witchcraft and invite demons thinking they'll give them power. Such a deception. They're not here for you. They're here to destroy you, to bring to destruction, and that this is only and ever what they're looking to do. But that Jesus gives us hope. It's not something to be fearful of, because often he's saying, have faith, have faith. And these will not have power over you. I think it's clear in Mark 9 here, verse 23, when Jesus said to him, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. That we're not to be in fear. And again, I love the father's response. It resonates with me so much that immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And I bet this father had gone through this for so long, endured this suffering of his child, I'm sure he loved his son so much, that this was so difficult probably to be like, how can this be fixed after so long? But he believed. He had that faith as a mustard seed, the smallest bit of faith in the saying, help my unbelief, help me believe, increase my faith, and that it was enough, that was enough. Just that bit of faith that he comes out and asks. And I think that this is again an encouragement that we're not to be fearful of these demons, that we must just have faith, even the faith of a mustard seed. And so we kind of now can circle back to the question of why could the disciples not do this? They're asking quite clearly, what happened here? I thought we could do this. And so let's now jump back to Matthew 17. And as I mentioned, we'll revisit verse 21 here. That there's this thing here about, however, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. And I want to just look at this real quick, but you'll see there's a little note, and it might be really tiny here, but it says, NU omits, verse 21, that the oldest manuscripts, we've covered this before, the Codex Sinaiticus and the Codex Sinaiticus, or Codex Vaticanus and the Codex Sinaiticus, these are the oldest manuscripts we have, do not have this verse. So it would seem reasonable that, this was likely added over time somewhere down the line, but that the very oldest things we have just omit verse 21 completely. And you can see this in often many of the modern translations that are based off of the oldest manuscripts don't have this verse at all. So this would be the ESV, this would be one of these, where you can see verse 20, and it's saying, and he said to them, because of your little faith, for I truly say to you, and he continues, but then there's no 21. There's nothing about this type of demon. There's nothing about prayer and fasting. It just jumps to 22. And as they were gathering in Galilee, Jesus said to them that these, so the ESV, NESB, CSB, HCSB, NIV, etc., all of these modern translations will be more conformed to the oldest manuscripts, which don't have that verse at all. That if we look now at Luke's account, so we have another account here, Luke chapter 9. I'm not going to read it all, but this is 37 through 42. He mentions nothing about this. He makes no mention of like a special type of demon or prayer or fasting or anything like this. There's nothing. And that now if we go back to Mark 9, I mentioned we would go back to chapter 9, but verse 29 here at the bottom. And so he said to them, this kind can come out by nothing but prayer and fasting. And that you'll see here, there's a little mark. The last part of that verse, it says, and you omits and fasting. So that the oldest manuscripts don't have that. And I think I have here the ESV again, just to show that what these more modern translations, which are based on the older manuscripts, will say, and he said to them, this kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer. So as a quick recap, I'm just sort of establishing that there's not as much evidence for this thing. That in the oldest manuscripts, Matthew 17 makes no mention of a special type of demon, of this prayer and fasting. It's not there. Luke 9's account, nothing about it. And then in Mark 9's, the oldest manuscripts kind of omit the fasting part, but that this is truly then the only one that kind of makes mention of this. And I think that the why this is important is because I don't think our emphasis should be on like super demons or like special kinds of demons, and that you should then be fearful of them because they're kind of like more elevated. Watch out, you can't do anything. And that I don't think that should be our focus, because Jesus's focus when in the context of this conversation in both Matthew 17, Mark 9, and Luke 9, Jesus always is talking about faith. Faith was always mentioned in every account, and that here, we have it in Mark 9:23, and Jesus said to them, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. That was like the first answer to this, that this was the answer to this demon thing. And in Matthew 17:20, it's the same thing. So let's go back there. When Jesus is asked by them saying why could we not cast it out? What is he saying? Because of your unbelief. For assuredly, I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, be moved from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. So I just feel those are strong statements, powerful statements that if Jesus says it, I believe it, and I'm going, look, I think this is the focus. This is the focus we're to have, is not worrying about whether this is a special type of demon or not. And in fact, again, I could even contend when he says type, he might be just talking about the fact that this demon had been with this child for so long, because the father mentions from childhood. So again, it might not even be like a super demon or anything, but nevertheless, either way, Jesus's focus was always on faith, faith, faith. I mean, imagine moving mountains. And Jesus's disciples and apostles later on are casting out demons with no issue. So I think this was an issue of faith here, and that should be the takeaway from this and nothing else. So let's continue in Matthew 17. We'll do verses 22 and 23. Now, while they were staying in Galilee, Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And the third day he will be raised up. And they were exceedingly sorrowful. I just think we should take note here of the increased frequency with which Jesus is telling his disciples, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. It's happening very often now. And Jesus is known from the beginning here, but that I think he knows I'm going to leave soon. And these poor guys, I need to prepare you for what's going to happen. It's going to be awful. And it kind of mentions here, and they were exceedingly sorrowful. They were sad about this, but I think the scriptures are kind of clear. They didn't get it still. They're still clueless, because when Jesus rises from the dead, they're still having to have it explained to them. And then once it's explained to them, they're like, oh, they brought back to mind all the times Jesus told them this. And it's I get it now. But I think merely just hearing their master, their good friend Jesus, kind of say, hey, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm sure that would make you sad. You're just hearing this and going, I don't know what he's talking about, but I don't want to hear it. This makes me sad. So I think that that's all this means. But that again, Jesus is trying to prepare them as best as he can, that they still don't quite understand it. And we'll finish here with verses 24 through 27. And when they had come to Capernaum, those who received the temple tax came to Peter and said, does your teacher not pay the temple tax? And he said, yes. And when he had come into the house, Jesus anticipated him, saying, what do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth take customs or taxes? From their sons or from strangers? And Peter said to him, from strangers. And Jesus said to him, then the sons are free. Nevertheless, lest we offend them, go to the sea, cast in a hook, and the first fish that comes up, and when you have opened its mouth, you will find a piece of money. Take that and give it to them, for me and for you. And I love these, talked about my kind of background a lot. I love these examples of where Jesus isn't worried at all about this. He makes it clear, I don't have to pay. The sons are free. But going past that, he doesn't stress about this one bit. It doesn't even stop him. He's not fazed. It's like, dude, what are you talking about? That I think this is a great example again of like not being worried about money, food, clothing. That it's like, no, what do you, get out of here with this. I am doing the will of God, which is to preach, teach, and to heal. He's clearly on a mission, and that this is just a distraction, and he's not going to have any of it. Again, it's almost comical to me. He could have just probably asked somebody, hey, dude, you got a coin? Like, hey, man, you got some change? And all of his followers probably been like, no problem. Like people would have probably said, hey, yeah, let me help Jesus. But he's like, no, here's how I'm going to show. My Father's going to provide for us. Go and catch a fish. And how many fish have you ever caught that had money in its mouth? I've never seen it. I'm not much of a fisher, but my grandpa was, my dad was. I've never heard of it. But Jesus is like, look, I'm going to show that my Father's going to take care of us. We don't need to bat an eye about this. And that this fits with Jesus' teachings in Matthew 6, that he says, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you, that we are not to worry about food or clothing. Your Father knows you have need of these things. So it's not like he's saying, hey, you don't need it. He's like, he knows you have need of these things, but seek first the kingdom of God and all of his righteousness, and these will be added to you. So I think this is a great example of that actually taking place here. And again, Jesus not even blinking an eye, just boom, moving right on. But now circling back to when he's making it clear, I don't need to pay. And what was his reasoning? Well, the kings, they tax strangers. Kings don't tax their sons. That this is the house of the God of Israel, and that he's the son. That would therefore make his father the God of Israel. Amen. That the God of Israel is the father, and that he's not saying, this is my house. I don't pay for my own house. No, he's saying, I am the son. That the sons are free, so I don't have to pay. So this is maybe an indirect statement of Jesus claiming to be the Son of God. That he's like, look, this is the house of God. I'm a son. I don't need to pay, but I didn't want to offend you guys, so I did this. But I just think, yeah, this is really important that once again, Jesus is professing, not that this is my house, but no, that I'm the son of the Father who owns this place. This is why I don't have to pay. That he is the Son of God, and this fits with what we read in John 11. When Martha, he says, do you believe this? She says, yes, you are the Christ, the Son of God. That last week in Matthew 16, when Jesus says, who do you say that I am? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That I'd hope we would always know and believe this, that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God. And this is the end of Matthew chapter 17. God bless.